I've been secretly investigating people to try figure out who killed my mom. The police said it was an accident, but I'm not so sure. The way she was found was strange to say the least. Why would a 64-year-old woman with a bad knee and arthritis be doing climbing a tree? I often had to help her climb the steps to the front door, and that's only 3 steps. They said the cat got stuck up the tree again and she went up after him. I know she cared more about that cat than any of us, but I couldn't see her climbing a tree. She often got dizzy wearing high heels. There is only 3 people that could have done it, me included, and I'm fairly sure it wasn't me, so that leaves Tom and Jimmy. Both of which could have thrown Ma'am off the roof and dragged her carcass down the field to make it seem like an accident. They really hated her, not that they didn't have their reasons. She wasn't what you would call a nurturing mother. For instance, one time Jimmy begged her to talk to Tom about bullying him, which at one point got so bad, Jimmy stopped talking completely for almost 3 months because he was sick of Tom making fun of his speech problem. She wouldn't even answer him, she just laughed and sent him to bed. Tom probably had it the worst though. He was way too loud for her to ignore, so she used to lock him in the closet with a sock in his mouth anytime he annoyed her, which was a lot. I probably had it the best. She was nice to me and often took me to the park or beach like a normal child, but that was only when Tom and Jimmy weren't around. Tom was my first suspect. He came out just after me that day and he was complaining about how Mom had threatened to get him taken away if he didn't stop talking shit. But he genuinely looked upset when he found out she died. Plus, he said Jimmy came out just after him, and he was acting really weird. He told Mom to go F herself when she asked him to make a cup of tea. I'm not so sure it was Jimmy either. I was talking to him just before I found her, and he seemed relaxed, which I imagine you wouldn't be if you were just after murdering someone. Plus, he seemed confused when I asked him about telling Ma'am to go F herself. It's so frustrating. I just know it was one of us. I found blood on our left hand and scratch marks on our neck from the cat, but no one seems to remember where they came from. Unless, there is another one in here that hasn't shown themselves yet. Jesus, I hope not. I barely get a word out as it is. I think I'm losing my head. I was driving home after a long day at work. I blinked, and the next thing I knew, I was at home having dinner with my wife and 2 daughters. "What's wrong, honey?" she asked me. "I don't know. I just feel like I've forgotten something," I replied, confused. Forgot something? It was much worse than that. I had no memory of going home. I reassured her and spent the rest of the evening as normal, rewatching one of my favorite movies. Eventually, I dozed off in front of the sofa. I dreamt strange things. I saw myself at the age of 11, having a picnic with my parents. Except they weren't smiling and happy like I remembered them. Instead, they were sitting on the picnic blanket, staring into space, their faces closed and expressionless. No matter how much I shouted at them in my dream, I couldn't see any life left in them. It was as if they were there, without being there. I woke up in my bed, alone. I looked all over the house, but not only was my wife gone, so were my children. My cell phone line was dead, no service. I went outside to get my car and drive to work, thinking I'd try to call my wife a little later. There was no one on the road but me. It was as if the whole earth had emptied out. I dismissed my amnesia last night, but I was seriously beginning to wonder if I was losing my mind. I was lost. I decided to go to my work to see if anyone was still in town, if a national evacuation drill was underway and could explain everything. Once there, I rushed back into the building, hoping to find someone who could explain what was going on. And when I opened the door, I was relieved to see that all my colleagues were there. At last, I could find out what was going on. I walked over to David, a colleague who over the years had become my best friend. "Hey David, what's going on? My family's disappeared and there's nobody left in town," I asked him. He didn't answer. "David?" I insisted. I stepped forward to face him, and discovered to my horror that his face and expression were exactly the same as my parents in my dream. It couldn't be. Was I trapped in a nightmare? I tried to talk to everyone, but they were all in the same state. My head hurt, my eyes hurt. I saw lights, and sounds filled my ears even though there was nothing there. Nothing alive. My vision began to narrow. Sounds began to blend together. Blackness. Emptiness. And finally, words I didn't have time to understand came to me for the last time. My God, the other driver is dead for sure, his head was torn off by the impact.
I took part in the murder of a famous band nobody remembers. It was called the Lost and Found Ritual. I was selfish. We were alone at Christmas. Mom and Dad were dead after a freak accident. There was no food, no hot water or electricity, and CPS were days from taking our little sister. My brother's new friends said they would take care of everything. We just had to make a wish. I wished for our house. Rowan wished for Mom and Dad. Poppy wished for snow and bunny rabbits. Eternity Light, the biggest band in the world, was our target. Made up of 5 members from Korea, Thailand, Australia, and America, their debut in the West had taken the world by storm with their pop/rock songs that stuck in your head for days. I had one job, and that was tricking them into getting into our car. Getting into the venue was easy enough. The people helping us were definitely the band's rivals, and had the connections to turn suspicion away from me, a 17-year-old security guard. Yo, aren't you a little young to be working security? Ty, the face of the band, was standing in front of me, swaying a little. The girl working behind the bar had slipped a sedative into his drink for $4,000. Handsome, with a battered pair of Ray-Bans pinning unruly curls to his head, a popped shirt collar showing too much chest, and a slightly unhinged smile with the tinge of a Boston accent, the lead singer of Eternity Light was nicer than I thought. Don't go soft, Rowan hissed in my earpiece. We've got the others. Ty is a slippery one. Do it. So, I did. I dragged the man out of the back entrance, shoving him into the awaiting car. Rowan drove us into the middle of nowhere, and following his friend's instructions, tied all 5 members to a tree. Rowan told Poppy to close her eyes and cover her ears. Ruby and Yuri, the girls, screamed, while the guys were quieter. When I held my breath, pressing the blade of my knife to Ty's throat, his eyes found mine, and he smiled. Spiteful, spitting blood when I punctured his heart. His blood was my mom and dad. That's what I told myself. I know you're there, he slurred, head lolled, flickering eye scanning the dark behind me. Is this because we stole your stupid song? When his body went limp, something cold grazed my face. I looked up, snowflakes dancing in my eyes. Something furry brushed my ankle, Poppy squealing with delight. Bunny rabbits. The band was gone, no traces, not even their blood on my hands. My phone vibrated. Mom. Hey, where are you? Dinner is cold. Rowan caught my eye, smiling. We went home. Back to our old house, strung with Christmas lights. I hugged my mom, ignoring the slimy consistency of her skin. The stitches holding her and Dad together. There was a band on the radio. Calypso. They're taking the world by storm.
Mouse coffin. I once made a mouse coffin. From pine and stainless screws. I had cut the pieces perfectly in spite of all the booze. The design just took a minute, but the sanding took 3 hours. I made a bed from cotton balls. And a pillow made from flowers. The final touch was special. Adding a sliding door to see. So I can peek just one more time, before he's gone from me. I put my mouse inside. I sipped my beer inside. I walked down to the maple tree. Where I stumbled down and cried. I dug a hole that was 3 feet deep, a perfect place for eternal sleep. I told him what he had meant to me. And then I said a prayer. I covered him up. And I grabbed my beer. I went back home. To shed in tears. I knew quite well, and felt assured, that he was safe inside that coffin. The worms could not get through to him. The snakes could not make a meal of him. I'll be sure the dogs won't uncover him. Because I'll visit him quite often. But as 3 months passed, I found myself just thinking while I was drinking about the mouse under the maple tree. The mouse that had been good to me. The mouse who was a friend to me. Through good times and the bad. I remembered how he'd cheered me up. As I slammed some whiskey back. It was then, just then. I paused and stared. I sat straight up in my rocking chair. I was out of whiskey, so I grabbed a beer. And I thought. But my thoughts weren't clear. I sipped on my beer as I thought aloud. There was something wrong. Overlooked somehow. There was something that just did not feel right, at all. Something. About that night. About the mouse. And the burial. I thought. And I thought, while I sipped on my drink, then I leaped from my porch, tripping over my feet. I followed the trail to the maple tree. Where I stared at the gravesite. And kicked at the leaves. It was then when the thought came over me. As I glanced at the beer in front of me. When I made the mouse coffin. I had placed my mouse in. To see if the size was the size that would fit him. But thinking back now, my mouse was alive. And I'd forgot. That's it. I forgot. Oh my. I forgot to wait until he died. Before sealing his body up inside. So I drank and drank and drank some more, and then I cried and cried.